Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Saturday night with me. You got to be excited. Change Agent Podcast Live. Here we are. Nice to have you. If you have not done so already, go ahead and please do the mandatory subscription. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notifications bell so that you don't miss any other ones. And most importantly, tonight, we, of course, like we do every live session, put some comments in the chat room so I can see what you're talking about. What I'd like to know is where you're from and also some topics that matter to you, because I'm hoping that with some of the ideas that I get from you, the listeners, we'll be able to get topics covered in our podcast or right here. Because for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to be talking about something that I think needs to be a bit more forefront in the terms of leadership, and that's the cost of delaying a decision. It could be delaying anything, really, and whether it's a reward or whether it's punishment or whether it's an answer, a question, nipping some drama, conflict in the office in the bud. Um, it's really important that you do it as quickly as possible. But we're going to talk about all that. So let's just get to it. So again, if you're in the chat, um, go ahead and leave some comments. And also, if you are not in the chat yet, you're late. You can always add comments into there after. If you're watching this on the replay, add some comments into the in the links below, wherever you put them, and we'll get to them. We'll get the comments. We'll answer them. So either it'll be a reply to your comment, or it'll be a reply to that, plus um, some content that we're going to be building on that. So again, we're going to be talking about the cost of delaying decisions, or anything else for that matter. But before we do that, I want to go through a couple of ideas. Number one is that sometimes decisions simply cannot wait, and they have to be made with less information than you like. And this is one of the primary reasons, I think, why leaders try to delay a decision or an action, because they're waiting for 100% of that information. And sometimes you have to make a decision with 80% of the information. And I have always learned, and I've always practiced, that I'd rather make a decision with 80% on time, meaning quickly, than to wait and be late with 100%. So if I can afford it, I will wait for that 100%. I mean, who doesn't want all the information? You can make much more informed decisions that way. But what I will say is that it's often more likely that you're going to have to make a decision with less information than you would like. But let's talk about this for a second. What does delaying actually do? I'm curious to what your thoughts might be on that. Some people will say, well, it'll give me more time to make a decision. Well, that's the same. That's delaying. It actually moves the risk of your inactions over to other people. Because if you're in charge or you're responsible for making a decision, you need to be able to, one, have planned effectively for this particular moment. But you're also responsible for that decision, and you're responsible for the indecision. Leadership is not about, I'm responsible only for when things go right. And when it goes wrong or things go bad, that's not my problem. Yeah, that's not the way it works. So what you need to be doing is making sure that you remember that by delaying a decision, by waiting, you're pushing the risk of that inaction onto other people, because someone's going to pay for that. And I'm going to talk about that more in just a few minutes. But before we get bent up about the idea of having to make 80% decisions with 80% of the information, you need to know that there are cases for sure where the idea of delaying is sometimes a very prudent and responsible thing to do. Sometimes it is the right thing to do to wait for just a minute. For example, in the heated argument, in a really complex, dramatic problem that you might have. Maybe there's a sexual harassment problem. Maybe there's a discrimination issue. Maybe there's a theft in the office. Someone stole some pens. Maybe there's an issue that you have with a person over and over and over. In these cases, you're going to want to make sure you have as much information as possible because those are not what I would term, in most cases, those are not things that have to where you have to go out and get something done right away in order to resolve it. Those take investigations. They take information gathering to make the right decisions to understand who's responsible for what. In cases where you have to make decisions quickly, are you have a project due and there's some risk that became an issue because that's what happens. A risk is something that is not real. An issue is real, and you have all of a sudden that risk becomes an issue right at the last minute. You have to make a decision on what you're going to do. I'll give you a quick decision, a quick story on how this really looks in real time, in reality. When I was a program manager, I had probably about 18 people on a very large program, $400 million program for the US Department of Defense. And there were some issues, risks rather, between the signing of teaming contracts between two companies. The contract got awarded. Start date was like in 2 days. We had not finalized this teaming agreement between two contractors. And by not doing so, the government was quite nervous that we wouldn't have the team on board that we would need because there was no agreement. The response was from them to me was, if you don't have it done and have this completely fixed within, I don't know, 24 hours, 48 hours, then your company is going to receive a cure notice. And our company was the prime contractor, and we were trying to make teaming agreements with a subcontractor. And what actually ended up happening was I had to make a decision quickly about what we were going to do. And I didn't have time to wait for 100% of the information, which would be, why are you delaying the contract, company B? Why aren't you answering my questions? Why won't you be more acceptable of the things and the points that I have in the contract? And what actually ended up happening was we solved it. But I had to make a decision with less information than I would have liked in order to get this thing moving. How you go about doing that is, another topic, but it is what it is. But that's what I mean. You have to make a decision about things like that. If it's something that's serious and needs investigation, that's when it's going to be prudent and responsible, as I've mentioned before. But remember this, though: prolonged delay without any kind of clarity or justification to your people, to your team, to your supervisors, to the people above you, around you, all of your stakeholders. If you delay without giving clarity, justification, communication, and all that, you're really just abdicating this whole entire throne of information, of leadership. You're abdicating that position. And what that will actually do is that will create far more issues for you than you are probably likely prepared for. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to try to figure out, okay, well, I need to concentrate on how to make a decision with 80% of the information. And oh, by the way, now I've got all of these people that are asking for, why did you wait? What's going on? What's happening? And you're creating all this confusion. So be careful about the strategic play of delaying a decision. While it's important that you make decisions quickly with the best information you have, this actionable intelligence, it's also very important that you remember that should you delay, you're abdicating your position as a leader. If you have not indicated why you're doing this, you haven't justified it, you haven't communicated it, or any of that stuff. So you want to make sure that that's one of those things that you're prepared for. So you might be asking yourself, how in the world am I going to balance all of this? How do I balance that? What do I do? Well, there's a pretty simple question as I thought about this more and more and more. And through the experience and talking with other leaders, it was simply one question. If I'm going to wait for certainty before I do anything, we know that what that means, right? That means you're putting the risk onto someone else. Who's paying for that? Who's impacted by that? If it's your team, if it's your boss, if it's your stakeholders, your customer, somebody's paying for all of these decisions, good or bad, right? They're going to pay for those. Hopefully money for the good ones. But in this case, you're going to be asking yourself, if I'm going to wait for certainty before I do anything, who's going to pay the price for that? And so you want to make sure that you're willing to pay that. The best way to get around that is to simply communicate. Is to tell people immediately. It's because nothing gets better with time. Bad things do not get better with time. They just continue to grow. And the more you delay, the more you wait, the more confusion you're going to have, and people are going to start having problems, and they're going to start paying for that. Okay. Think of it this way. If you have a decision and things go south and you're not making decisions, let's say you've got a thing that's due, like a deadline that you've got to make, and all of a sudden something comes up and you can't, and you don't communicate, you don't uh, tell people why you're justifying the wait, and it overflows, and your bosses come in and say, now you've waited too long to do anything about it. What are you doing? Now everyone has to work the weekend. Everyone has to work 12 hours of overtime. You're fired. So who's paying for it? So there are a few pitfalls that you can really look for to kind of help you get ready to recognize the danger zone. Because again, delaying can be fruitful, it can be prudent, it can be the right thing to do if you do it correctly. But then there comes that red needle point, right? That um, tachometer that goes into the red of the car. It says it's bad now. You got to do something. You got to recognize before you get there what's going to happen. So here goes some pitfalls that you can look for. Whether it's you looking at the leader or it's you. So just put these into that context of whichever one it fits. Those who stay silent and disappear, that's a pitfall. That's a warning. If you have a leader there's an issue going on and you know what's going on and you see it happening and that person disappears or they're silent and they don't justify why they have a silence, that's a problem. So keep that in your notebook. If they're silent, if they're not communicating, there's a problem. Okay. Also, you might want to watch out for the leader, or you might want to watch out for being the leader that says, I'm just being cautious. I'm waiting until I have all the information I need in order to get things done correctly. You could ask you could ask them, or you can ask yourself, can you afford to wait? Right? You can say, well, am I just going to sit here and wait for all night, or am I going to ask you, can you afford to wait? You could ask them something pretty simple. You could say, is there anything that I can do to help you move things along? Likewise, if you're a leader and you have this I'm being cautious point, it actually means you might have a bit of fear in making a decision. And that's pretty natural. Everybody's nervous about making decisions. They don't want to make the wrong decision. But what you could do is you could say, is there anything I could do to help you move things along? Likewise, leaders, be courageous. And if you feel like that there's a bit of fear in you in making the right decision, get people in front of you and soundboard it. Ask them instead of them asking you, can they help you move it along? Ask them, what decisions do you guys recommend that we do in this situation to make this thing move along faster? And start bringing that team in, making them feel responsible for the righting of the ship, making them feel like that their information that they have to provide to you is valuable. So it's really important that it's not just a one Eric does everything by himself kind of thing. Leadership is not that. Like leadership is this coalescent of people coming up with ideas on how to solve problems. So don't use I'm being cautious, I'm waiting for more information to push people away. Remember this, that being responsible for making decisions is completely agnostic to being fully informed. What does that mean? It means that one thing is not connected to the other. You don't need to have 100% of the information to make the right decisions, to make any decision. It may not be the best one, but in that moment, you will be rewarded for making a decision that prevents a catastrophe. Okay? Do you want 100% of the information? Absolutely. Can you act with less of the information? Absolutely. You need that actionable intelligence. In the intelligence community, they have two things. As we get ready to wind down for the last 5 minutes. If you're online and you're watching, put something in the chat. Hello, whatever. I want to see some text flying through here. Um, there's a couple things in the intelligence community, United States intelligence community, that where they talk about um, the confidence rating of information that you receive to make an intelligence assessment. How much information or actionable intelligence do you have to be able to make an assessment? And the priority into which this information is going to be passed up to senior leaders. And of course, the typical classification level. Um, what you really need to remember is that that same concept that the United States intelligence community, which includes FBI, CIA, NGA, NSA, NRO, and if you don't know those acronyms, go online and look at them. Everybody knows the CIA. They all have this encapsulated concept of how, in practice, of how they use and react to intelligence. And it's really interesting to me that more often than not, leaders don't learn from things like that. These things that are out there and they're available to you, and you're not really using them. Katerina says hi, and my strategic perspective is always so good. Thank you. Thumbs up. We got one. And the same thing applies. Before we close out, I want to recommend a book. So, The Psychology of Intelligence Analysis, that's the name of the book. Sounds super interesting. The author is Richard J. Heuer, spelled Heuer. It's one of those really good books that can teach you a lot about making decisions in two different ways. One, they call it hasty, which is quickly, and two, deliberate, which is you're taking your time. And they have methodologies for making decisions. And of course, the corporate worlds have their decision-making matrices all over the place. You can find ways to do that, and how you're going to respond to risks and all these different things. It's really important, though, that you try to get as much literature as you can so that you can try to figure out all the different tools that you can put in your toolbox to make decisions. As we wrap up, the last thing that you're going to want to remember, as we've said throughout this entire live session, is that you're definitely going to want to make sure that you remember, do not delay. Delaying is just one of those things. And the only time that you can delay is when it's investigatory, if that's even a word. It's when you have to make an investigation on those types of scenarios that I provided earlier. But if it's not one of those, it's something due tomorrow, it's some drama that you got going on that's immediate, like someone got injured or whatever the case is, you'll know it when you see it. You need to make that decision as soon as possible, and you need to communicate with your team exactly what it is you're going to be doing and why you're delaying. Know how long you can delay. Oftentimes, a leader will say, "Well, I'm going to delay for 1 hour," or "I won't know how long I'm going to delay until I get all the information," or I just don't know how long I'm going to wait. I don't know when I'm going to get the answer." That might be the case, but please, if you're going to make those decisions, because you got to remember, making no decision is a decision. It absolutely is a decision by making no decision. And so, thanks, Tanya. Love your videos. We got 2 now. We're all over it. We're going to hit the sky here before long. Making no decision is a decision. Can you live with making no decision? Can you be okay with someone else paying for your inactions? I sincerely doubt it. So the best thing you can do is to ask those questions that I mentioned, and if you need to know what they are, go back and watch the video. Put some comments in there about what you want to hear about next week. We're going to be here live every week on Saturdays at 7 o'clock, unless I decide I'm not going to. I might be gone, and I won't be doing it while I'm on travels. But you can also make sure that you find us on YouTube at the Change Agent Podcast. We're on Spotify and all of your favorite podcast platforms, and we release really cool interviews weekly, usually on Mondays at 2 p.m. GMT. That's London, if you didn't know. And we welcome all emails, contact, and however you can reach us, whether it's through Facebook, Instagram, email, whatever. YouTube. Tell us what you want to listen to. Tell us what some interviews that you want to listen to. Some who are some guests that we can get on the show. And so looks like we got one topic popping up in the chat: toxic leadership. If that's something you want to hear, uh, well, we've got one that definitely wants to do it. So we're going to be doing one on toxic leadership. We'll do that next week. Thanks, Katerina, for recommending that. And very often leaders cannot make decisions and cannot communicate about it, and they certainly can't. And working in challenging environments, all of these are really good. So we've got tons of content coming in. And thank you guys so much again for joining. Don't forget, you can still leave stuff in the chat after we close off, but this important message about delaying in a decision cannot be more. I can't kill that horse anymore, I don't think. Pun intended, because I live in a town full of horses. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are excited to be a part of your community and having you with us as well. And that's it. Thank you so much. Well, catch us on YouTube, catch us on Spotify, catch us on all the cool stuff that we do. And great to have you. Bye-bye.